when we have cabinet meeting, I always start off by saying every decision that we make around this table should be in the betterment of our students. Not adults, not this person, not that. But how is this going to help children?
Welcome to another episode of the Powercast. I'm your host alongside my colleague here from California, Jeff Pelzel. I'm Dr. Rick Fernandez, and we're bringing you the best in leadership and innovation from across the country. And we have a special guest, an SEC representative. I got to tie everything back to sports. Dr. Mark Sullivan, the superintendent, Birmingham City Schools.
There you are.
Welcome.
Welcome. Well, I appreciate being here. Yeah, you're right. The SEC has done really good things over the last few years, but this year we were kind of down.
Yeah, and we joined, so we were kind of late to the party over there in Texas, but that's okay.
Hey, but you guys dominated this year, so that's always good.
So you were sharing a little bit off camera about your non-traditional journey to a superintendency. Can you just talk a little bit and share with our audience some of your path?
So I started off in Birmingham City Schools as a substitute teacher 30 years ago, and I worked my way up from substitute teacher to superintendent of Birmingham City Schools. And I think I shared with you along the way, I've had, I think it's 17 superintendents in my career in Birmingham. So I learned a little bit from everybody, a little bit of what to do and a little bit of what not to do.
When did you know, though? Because your first couple times as a substitute, I got to assume it was a little bit of an eye-opener. And then when did you know, all right, this is what I want to do. I want to serve students.
So, actually, I started off when I went to college, I wanted to be a dentist. I had a guy who lived next door to me. He was a dentist, and he was in school to be a dentist. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. But my mom, she was a teacher, so she didn't really save a lot of money for us to go to college. So I joined the Navy Reserves. And so I went off to Alabama A&M. I wanted to, major in biology, and then I was going to transfer to Mahara to get a degree in dentistry. And I got activated for Desert Storm. And so my reserve center called me, and they said, well, you're being activated for Desert Storm. So I hung the phone up because I thought it was like some of my friends, a practical joke. So the guy called me again. He said, listen, you call the reserve center. So I called the reserve center. He said, I'm here. You've been activated. So I was like, wait a minute. This is just supposed to be like 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. This is not about going to war, guy. So I got activated. I was gone for 10 months. And so my mom was a teacher. My aunt was a teacher. My uncle was a custodian. I had an aunt who was a cafeteria manager. I did not want to go into education, but when I came back, I said, okay, I got all these credits. What can I do? I want to go ahead and finish. So I finished, started teaching, started as a substitute teacher, and I just loved it, man. I mean, just the ability to go into a classroom and transform students' lives and really make a difference for students. And what the school I started teaching in was 100% Title I school district, 100% Title I school. Students, had some really, really difficult home circumstances. Yeah. And you were really, as a teacher, like that lifeline for these kids. And just the power of making a difference in students' lives, man, it really just transformed me as a person. And I said, this is what I want to do. And I said, that's why my mom went to stay.
She was right. Did you have to go back and call her and say, Mom, you were right?
Yeah. Well, she actually came and helped me. She was so proud. She came and helped me put my room together, put my bulletin boards up because, I wasn't really good with that, but she did that. And she was very proud, and it's been a rewarding career. I love every job I've ever had.
Well, if there's any consolation, sometimes what you do as a superintendent feels like you're going through a root canal. So maybe you are still doing some dentistry work.
Yeah, I have a few stories to go along with that too.
But you guys have had, great success, mm-hmm. and you've mentioned that you've been there probably longer than most superintendents get to sit in that seat. What's been some of the reasons of the success? What do you say? All right, these are really the drivers of why the district's been successful, but also that you've been successful as a leader.
So I think you're right. This is my 5th year as superintendent in Birmingham, and that makes me the longest serving superintendent in Birmingham since 1996. Yeah. So that, we've had some as little as a few months, some as a year, 2 years, I think 4 years. We had 2 that were 4 years, but this is the 5th year for me. So I think the success in Birmingham City Schools really ties to our focus on tier one instruction, because for so long, because we are a high poverty district, we're 86% free and reduced lunch, 89% African American, 11% Latino. So we're really a high poverty black and brown school district. And so we've had a lot of superintendents who came in, and they came in with the mindset that we have to remediate students. And so that hasn't been my mind. It wasn't my mindset as a teacher. It wasn't my mindset as a principal. My mindset has always been teach children to high standards. And when students don't achieve those standards, then you provide scaffolds to support them to get them to the high standards. And so we de-invested in remediation and invested in interventions, and so that we can identify students who are having academic challenges right away, and then address those so that we don't get in a situation where kids are not reading in 7th and 8th grade. And then the next thing we did was we expanded the number of days in the school year. I brought this to the board right after the pandemic, and I was like, man, if we can't do something different now, when can we do something different? So I said, let's go to a year-round calendar. So I presented to my school board, and they were like, no. I said, well, let's do a survey. So I surveyed my teachers and parents. No. Then I said, well, let's survey the students. I know the students want to get back at school. They were like, HELL, no. And so what I did was I compromised, and we did what we call a modified calendar, where we attend school for 9 weeks. We're out of school for a week. During that week when we're out of school, we keep all of our schools open. We pay our teachers, custodians, lunchroom workers, bus drivers. We have 20,000 students. Our last intersession, we had over 6,000 students in school during a week when they didn't have to do it. And we do it 3 times a year, as well as our summer intersession. We're actually doing a presentation on Saturday about it. And so we've seen huge increases just by giving students more instruction. If we want to use the analogy around sports, and I know Nick Saban has retired, but if somebody told Nick Saban, hey, you can get 20 extra days of practice.
Oh, yeah.
Now, everybody else, Texas doesn't get it. Cal doesn't get it. UCLA doesn't get it. But you get 20 extra days of practice. He'd jump all over that. And his players would be better because they have 20 extra days.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in education. Give kids more time for instruction, because, we got 3 months off during the summer. We only have really 6 hours a day. Students are only in school 180 days. They're out of school more than they're in school. They're out of school 185 days. So we have to find ways to push in on that 185 in order to get more outcomes academically for our students.
I mean, it is. I actually think that's why Alabama has been good for so long, is because they're always playing into the end of the year.
Yeah.
So they're always getting that much more opportunity.
More reps.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The more reps you get, the better you get at anything. What Malcolm Gladwell said, 10,000 hours or whatever.
That's right.
Just giving kids more opportunities to learn. And in an environment that I'm in, many of our students are not actively engaged in educational endeavors when they're not in school. And so if we can push in on that 185 and get more of that time for instruction, we can see more positive academic outcomes.
There's so much talk that I hear right now about Alabama and your 3rd grade reading scores and the growth. I mean, I'm out in California, and this is the talk. And in fact, I was just at an AI summit sitting down with a gal who's an innovation leader in a school district in Alabama. Her name is Brooke. I can't remember her last name, but I started talking to her about that. I mean, significant growth, and in your NAEP scores. So talk to me about what's going on in Alabama.
For us, Alabama enacted the Literacy Act. It says that if a student is not reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade, that child has the possibility of being retained in 3rd grade. And so Alabama has put a lot of money and efforts into the science of reading, making sure that our teachers are trained in letters. Also auxiliary teachers, because when you're working with students who need additional assistance, having one teacher in the classroom is not going to provide those layered supports for students. So we have auxiliary teachers in the classroom. In Birmingham, prior to the implementation of the Literacy Act, we were at 53% of our 3rd graders reading on grade level, which was atrocious in my mind. And so we did a huge all-out push, bringing our community in, bringing in volunteers, providing additional supports for our classroom, getting all teachers trained for letters. By the time we ended the year last year, we were at 86%. So we went from 53% to 86% of our students reading on grade level.
Ridiculous.
And our 2nd graders went from 50% to around 70%. So now they're going into 3rd grade. Instead of going in at 53%, they're going in at 70%. So it's a whole lot of emphasis on making sure children are reading on grade level.
You mentioned something that I think is pretty powerful, because you're right about the way that schools do remediation, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of want both of y'all's take on this. I always believe that your first shot, whatever it is usually the best that you've got, right?
That's
So,
right.
when I wanted to ask my wife out for the first time, I didn't come up with my second best.
You had to shoot your best shot.
Right. And so to think that if the first one doesn't work well, that the second and third and fourth is going to be marginally better, that's probably not the case. But like you said, if we're ahead of it and we're seeing interventions, like if I'm ahead, I'm paying attention to what this young lady likes and what she doesn't like. So when I do ask my wife out, I have a better sense of where to go. I think it's kind of the same logic of teachers are giving their best that first time. We just got to get them more information as they're delivering that best shot.
You're absolutely right. I remember we had a superintendent that used to say that in our school district we had an inverted pyramid. And the pyramid, it typically says that there are a small number of students, like 10%, that need tier 3, 15% needs tier 2, and then the vast majority need tier 1. And so she said we were inverted pyramid, where we had the vast majority of our students needing tier 3 instruction. And so I always push back against that, because I think if you push that narrative to teachers and the community, it speaks to expectations. So if you walk into my classroom and I say, well, you're a tier 3 student, without even just giving you the eyeball test, even though I may not overtly say it, in my mind, the way I treat you and the way I provide instruction to you is limited. So what we wanted to do was turn that on its head and say that every child should be taught like they're gifted. And when they don't respond to academic, tier 1 instruction, then there is something wrong. Not that if they don't respond to tier 1 instruction, that's normal. We'll just start these litany of interventions, because you can't intervene yourself to success. Right. You can't remediate yourself to success. Remediation. And when remediation becomes the core instruction, students never get grade level instruction. And then when they're assessed on grade level material, right, and they've never been taught
you can't catch
up.
So
then they don't do well, and it's not because they're not capable of doing well. It's because they haven't been taught the skills and the standards in order for them to have an opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, I always think, you can set the bar low and everyone gets over it, or you can set the bar higher and maybe only 60%, and then you figure out which don't. But all those kids that didn't make that higher threshold, they still would have gotten over
chance to get over that.
Exactly. You've got to set them up for success. And like you said, giving them it's just one more label, tier 3, tier 2.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing that we can do, for our students. And we really have to. I mean, Rick, to your point, we really have to help teachers provide that best first. And you talked about this core instruction. I mean, that is ultimately the secret sauce in all of it, because otherwise, if we're sitting there trying to plug the holes, guess what? Life's moving on, and while you're plugging holes, the kids should still be learning. You got to accelerate, and then you do some remediation. Yeah.
It's like that. What's that children's store when the guy's putting his thumb in the dike and then another hole pops out over there?
Yep.
If you're constantly doing that, you're not going to ever get ahead. And so, when I became superintendent, I had a new school board coming on, and one of the things they kept talking about was innovation. So they want to do all these innovative things. And I said, if we are a high poverty school district, and if we focus on tier 1 instruction and teaching children to high levels, that's innovative, because a lot of people are not doing that.
Right.
And we have seen remarkable growth. We were featured in the New York Times as one of the few school districts that saw positive improvement post-pandemic. We were featured in Forbes magazine. And so just focusing on ensuring that children are taught and are taught at high levels, and given rigorous curriculum and given opportunities not just to remediate, but also we haven't really talked about, enrichment and advancement, because there are kids, because even when you're living in remediation, students who are gifted, or students who can excel higher than that, they don't get them needs met. So when we talk about teaching all students, you're talking about gifted, you're talking about special kids who have special needs, you're talking about EL students, you're talking about kids who come from poverty. So you have to be able to teach all students, and differentiated instruction, tier 1 instruction, that's like the key.
Yeah. How do you mentioned innovation, and obviously our world is changing rapidly, right? Whether it be, politically, technologically. How do you keep your staff nimble, agile, with AI coming in, and
Yeah.
now there's all these different ways that kids can access information, really, in adults, how we access information. How do you keep your staff nimble? How do you keep yourself nimble and looking at, all right, how do we leverage new technology?
So I think one of the things the pandemic taught us was that, and we were a very traditional school district, So it was like, leaders wanted you to have a full baked plan before you implement it. And if you didn't have a full baked plan, they would say, "Hey, we're building the plane while we're flying it,"
Right.
and that was seen as like a negative. But during the pandemic, one of the things that we kept telling our leaders was that things are going to change constantly. We don't know how this virus is spread at the beginning. We don't know, how we're going to provide instruction for our students. So we're going to try some things. Some things are not going to work, and then we're going to try some different things. And what I need you guys to do is be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because you can't say, well, you guys are unorganized or blah blah blah. You know how it can be in
Yes.
school districts if you roll a plan out that's not full baked. And so one of the things that we did was I talked to them about Apple. And I got a new iPhone and I'm still trying to figure it out. But when they sent an update, because they really beta tested on you. They send out something, and if it doesn't work, they just send you an update, and you update the bugs that they found out that didn't work while you. And so we had to get our teachers, our administrators in that mindset that, oh, we're going to send you an update. Okay, we tried this. We figured out these things were wrong. And let's send an update. And you got to be in the right mindset that says, okay, they're changing something again, or that we tried this. We identified the things that were wrong with it that we could do better, and then we are trying to make that better by sending that update out.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
I love that.
Rick, what he's talking about, really, what I'm hearing here is here you got a superintendent. He allows people to fail forward.
Yep.
I mean, that's the key thing, right? You're giving permission to try things new, and if it doesn't work, that's okay.
As long
as you're doing something that you believe is the best for kids and going to move them along.
And that's key. That's key because, a lot of times, and I always, when we have cabinet meeting, I always start off by saying every decision that we make around this table should be in the betterment of our students. Not adults, not this person, not that. How is this going to help children? And I think if people come with a genuine belief that this is going to help children, then we're open to all of those ideas. And it has to start off with, how does it support the teaching and learning in our classrooms?
As big as your district is, though, how do you get everyone rowing in the same direction? Because this just doesn't happen by chance.
So you have to over-communicate expectations. Over-communicate expectations. I can't say that enough because, and I'll give you an example of what that looks like. I was going to so like I said, I started off as a substitute teacher, and I had a lot of different superintendents. I had one superintendent said the test scores didn't matter, and all that, it was just lolly-da. And I had other superintendents who like, every point you get, I'm gonna. So I know we had to find our way in between. And when you have that many superintendents, principals start to think that, hey, I'm just going to outlast you and just do what I want to do.
This too shall pass.
Yeah, exactly. And so we had that. And then when they started, he's been here a year, 2 years, 3 years. I was at the airport, and our test scores came back. And I was going to a conference in Boston, and our middle school principals, they were going to the innovation conference out in California. So we met at the airport. They all had their laptops out going through the test data, talking to me about, okay, this teacher had this many students on grade level. We never had those kind of conversations. And now it's like changing the culture that's driven on using data to move achievement, and then knowing that there's going to be accountability tied to it. I mean, you just can't historically, year after year, have the majority of the children not reading well or operating on grade level, and you just sit there and it's okay. So
when was that the moment when you realized,
something is different, something is special? I said, something is different here. And that's a positive. And I think, and now there's a lot of pride. I mean, I get people coming up to me when those test scores came back and we had 86% of our third graders reading on grade level. Community people were coming up talking about how proud they were of district. We had our legislators, our politicians, they were doing interviews on television talking about how proud they were of the community and of the school district, and we never had before.
I think, Rick, we got a celebrity in the house.
Never had
We
that
got a
before.
celebrity in the house
You
in
know how it
Alabama.
is. You have some success, man.
There's
Oh,
one of my
yes.
former superintendents right over there.
So I got to ask, as a superintendent, you're having to manage so much and try to solve so many different types of problems. When you decide to partner with a provider, what gives you, the comfort level to say, okay, this is a trustworthy partner for my kids, for my staff? Like, how do you go through the progression, and when do you know that's the group?
So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a partnership, and if somebody is coming in and we're meeting and they're talking about not just how our organization can support what they do, but how they can support the work that we're doing in the school system, and then they have a genuine concern for our staff, for our students, you can tell that. And and they have proven results. You got the proven results, and they stay connected with the district, stay connected with whoever is managing that particular contract. Those are the partnerships that last, and when there is not success, that partner is just as upset as we are. And when there is success, that partner is just as proud as we are. And then you know that you have a true partnership. And we're very pleased. We've had to systematically eliminate some partners, but we've also had the opportunity to gain some really tremendous partners to help us with this work.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just was thinking about, what you're talking about is so connected to what goes on in the school district. It's relationships.
Exactly.
Relationships within your community, within your school system, your site administrators, the district level, and what you're talking about here is it's that trusted relationship that really matters, and you know that by the conversation that's happening on, do they know your district? Do they not know your district? There's nothing more offensive than you try to sit down and meet with someone and it's like, they don't even know how many schools you have, what what's going on in your school. They haven't even reviewed your
Alabama?
strategic. Exactly. They haven't looked at your strategic plan. They don't understand the needs. So I appreciate that, because when I put my superintendent hat back on, exactly what you're talking about, really knowing your district, to know whether they're going to be a fit and support for your mission and vision and work that you're doing.
Absolutely. And I know that this is not about Power School.
Right.
What I would say, Power School has been phenomenal for us. We have used quite a few of their platforms. They have. It's really, I'm not talking about what we had prior to, but we can really tell the difference in the ease of the access to Power School University, because we send our individuals, our staff members out to Power School University. It's just like the support that's tied to it is just phenomenal. And then the people that we have on the ground that's supporting our staff, I mean, they're almost like they're part of the district.
That's what we want to hear.
Want to give them a T-shirt.
Hey, we'll take it.
Well, join the family.
I'm a double X. Well, maybe a 3X after Thanksgiving. You never know. All right, take us out on this. What do you do for fun? So when you're not at the office.
I ride bikes, so I cycle. So I love riding my bike. I mean, getting out there on the road, not a motorcycle, a bicycle. Getting out there and riding the bike, giving like 11 miles, do 11-mile ride, and it's like freeing. It's really freeing. And I used to play golf, man, but I can't get out on the course like I used to. But I can always get my bike. In fact, I take my bike to work.
Is that your thinking? Like you're thinking and like kind of recharging and going through it and
in Alabama, you can have certain periods where you can ride, like in the fall and the spring are really key bike riding. But it's hard to ride a bike in 100 degrees and 100% humidity. But in the spring, it's beautiful.
That's exceptional. Well, Mark, thank you so much for spending a little time impromptu session with us and just sharing all the great things that are happening in Birmingham. And there's something I always like to say when you have a good school board, and clearly you must, because you've stayed. But I would always say to our school board members is, when you find a rock star superintendent, do what it takes to keep him. Wow. And this, we're not best friends. So I'm not saying that Mark didn't pay me to say that, but when you have a rock star, You got to do what it takes to keep them. And I live in my community. I vote with my school board. And when we find great superintendents, I'm a proponent of let's not let them go somewhere else. Let's make sure we're giving them the tools, we're supporting them. And quite frankly, we need to financially make sure that we are highly competitive because it is so difficult to find great leadership. So I'm sure you got a great board, but I always make that plea, like, don't lose great ones. Let them give them what they need to be successful and happy in the community. And they've done that, and I hope they continue to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today.
Absolutely. And on behalf of my partner here, Jeff, and Dr. Sullivan, thank you for joining the Powercast. If you like what you heard and seen, please subscribe, like, share accordingly, and we'll see you next time.